We also have Twitter, and there's a LinkedIn group as well, though we're not too active on that. Okay. We do have a YouTube channel, which we are currently streaming to, so hi YouTube. But you can find us at youtube.com/CONDG and subscribe there for our content there. Okay. So as Alan said a minute ago, if you're here in this room, please don't be downloading Borderlands 3. Keep the bandwidth needs to a minimal, and then that will be nice for our demo gods. Though, do you have the prayer of the demo gods today?
Always.
Okay, yeah, good. You're in for a treat if you didn't see this before. Thank you to Improving for sponsoring us, for hosting us, for being awesome, for the drinks and pizza. It's very, very, very appreciated. They host us, they host other groups, and they are just awesome in the community. So we really do appreciate them. We also thank JetBrains, who is providing the license keys for us for today, or the coupon for a license key. So someone here will be getting a free license key for 1 year to any JetBrains products, such as ReSharper, Writer, WebStorm, something like that. So we'll raffle that off at the end to those interested and eligible. Stir Trek. Anybody here know of Stir Trek? Good. Okay. So Stir Trek is a one-day conference in May in Columbus, Ohio. We have it over at Easton, that way. When we watch the Marvel movie of the year, which will be Guardians of the Galaxy 3 afterwards this year. I'm mentioning Stir Trek now for a few reasons. So first reason is the call for presenters is open. So if you are thinking about presenting a talk, if you've done it before, you want some help, talk to me. I'm actually on the reviewing committee this year, so I can't actually submit myself. But we want a wide variety of folks, especially from the Columbus community. So if you ever thought about talking at a conference or a user group, talk to me. I'd be happy to help you get started there. Also, there will be the call for volunteers shortly as well. So if you've ever thought about just volunteering with the event, getting free attendance, talk to me. I'll help you get hooked up there too. But thank you to Star Trek. Oh, and finally, if your employer might be interested in sponsoring, I think it's probably not too late for them to sponsor Star Trek as well. So more things for you to talk to me about. Other user groups in the area. We have Central Ohio Azure meeting the second Monday of every month. Is that here? Might be online. I'm not sure.
I think they're still online.
Yeah, I think they are. But that's a decent group. There's also the Global App Dev user group. They keep changing the name of this group. This one is online. This is a really good group run by a friend of ours. And that's a really good one to check out. Used to be based around Columbus, which is why it's still in our deck. Columbus.js meets over there, the other half of this room. Talk about JavaScript. Very good group run by Guy Royce. First Wednesday of the month at 6:30. And I'm not sure what they have going on, but that's always a good group to check out. And then CBus Data used to be CBus Pass, second Thursday of the month. I can't recall if they are online or in person, but they are.
Well, excuse me.
Here, you're fine.
They have been over at IDG in Dublin.
Oh, IDG?
For the
awesome.
last few times.
Thank you. So this year we are looking pretty blank. We have Sam today, which we are appreciative of. I've caught the second half of this talk and I really enjoyed it. We are still working on confirming our speaker for February, but we believe it's going to be around Selenium and C# testing, automated testing, things like that. March is still to be determined. We have a few leads. I have maybe 3 talks I can give in an emergency. My preference would be not me all the time. Right? So if you know somebody who would like to talk, if you'd like to talk, if you've seen someone to get something good, just connect us. We'd love to have them here. We'd love to feature more people in the community. And if you're interested in specific topics, let us know. Okay? We have a lot of openings, as you can see, for the rest of the year, and then lightning talks in July, which are always a lot of fun. Okay? And then we are, if you are looking for work, raise your hand. Okay? All right, if you are hiring, raise your hand. Okay. Talk to each other. All right, very cool. And then if you would like to help us with our shenanigans, help us find speakers, help us run the event, help us fix Chandler's car. Hi, Chandler, sorry. Please feel free to volunteer, and we'll help you out. We'll help connect you with what you're interested in. We might need help with social or just logistics of things, but just chat with us. We'd be happy to connect you. I believe that's all I've got. I'm going to turn things over to Sam, and Sam, why don't you take it from there? Thank you for speaking with us. Oh, while he's getting plugged in, one more thing, in person only, sorry, but I do have a bag full of stickers. So a bag full of Xamarin and .NET stickers. I'm going to put them out there, back there by the pizza. So please grab as many of these stickers as you want. I need to get these out of my trunk. But thank you to the .NET Foundation for providing those. Take it away, mister.
Thank you. Note this.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending in person or online to this presentation titled ARM, Bicep, Knees, and Toes, Infrastructure as Code for Beginners. A little bit about me. My name is Sam Gomez. I'm originally from Mexico, in fact. I am currently a tech lead at a company called Jenica. It's a software consulting company. You can check us out at jenica.com. We have a couple open positions at the time, so if you're looking, go to the website, check it out, or you can talk to me at the end. When I'm not working with anything technology related, I love spending time with my family. I have a wife and 2 kids. Watching movies, playing video games, and overall also playing soccer, watching soccer, and coaching soccer. So you want to talk to me, if there's something that I can spend hours talking other than technology, is that. You can connect with me on Twitter at @thesoccerdev, my GitHub, and you can also connect with me on LinkedIn if you have any questions after this. Or if you have any questions about Azure Cognitive Services, I also do some presentations on that topic. So I'd be happy to connect and help you out if you have any questions. All right, so the agenda for this talk, we're just gonna touch base real quick. Who is this talk for, or who's gonna probably get the most out of it? We're gonna look at the definition of infrastructure as code. We're gonna talk about the Azure Resource Manager. And then we're going to look at 3 different tools that you can use to deploy your infrastructure. So, who is this talk for, or who's going to get, I think, the most out of it? People that are completely new to infrastructure as code. So maybe you've heard the term before, but you don't really have a lot of information or no idea what that is. Maybe you have a little experience with ARM templates. Maybe you looked at it. A template once and you went like, I'm not touching that. That's too much. Not touching that. Also, maybe you've worked with ARM templates a lot, but you've started to hear about Bicep in the last, fairly recently. So we're going to look at that. Or if you work with those two, you've heard of Terraform, but you haven't really worked with it, then I think you'll get some useful information out of this. So, what is infrastructure as code? Is the using software development techniques and tools to deploy infrastructure in an automated, consistent, and repeatable manner. And those 3 are really the key to infrastructure as code. So we want it to be automated. We want to remove or reduce the human error factor from the equation. We want it to be consistent. We want to have the same environments all the time, because we don't want to deploy our applications only to find out that somebody didn't check a box or didn't configure something properly, and that's why we're having problems in our environments. And we want it to be repeatable. So we want to do this, we want to deploy the same resources as many times as we want. So for example, to do demos, maybe you just want to set up your environment, deploy your environment, just do your demo, tear it down at the end, and next time you have a demo, you do the same thing over and over again. That way, when you with these tools, with these these practices, that's what the things that that's one of the things that you can accomplish. And this is where these tools come in, and this is the tools that we're going to talk about. So we're going to talk about Bicep, we're going to talk about ARM templates, and we're going to talk about Terraform. There's a lot more tools out there that will allow you to deploy your infrastructure in this way. So Pulumi, Ansible, or some other that you can use. But obviously, in an hour, we can't really cover all of those, so we're going to focus on these 3. Now, before we do that, we're going to talk about the Azure Resource Manager because it's a key component when we talk about deploying resources in Azure. So ARM templates and Bicep is going to be something that is going to be at the heart of it. So it is an API provisioning engine built into Azure. So no matter which way you use to create your resources, whether you go into the Azure portal and you create a resource, or you use PowerShell or the CLI or REST calls, the Azure Resource Manager is going to be at the heart of it. So the Azure Resource Manager is going to take your Azure portal request and it's going to create whatever resources you actually want to create. So it's key to understanding how these deployments work and how these tools work. So some of the benefits of using the Azure Resource Manager is you can manage your infrastructure through templates, which is what we're going to do today. You can deploy resources in a consistent state. Again, that's one of the things that we want to do. We want it to be consistent. We want it to be the same thing every time. You can define dependencies between resources, apply tags to resources to organize them, and apply access control. But probably the most important thing that you get with the Azure Resource Manager is the orchestration. So when you create your templates, you only have to tell the Azure Resource Manager what you want to deploy, but you don't have to specify the steps. So you just want to say, or you can just say, I want to deploy a website, I want to deploy a SQL database, Azure Resource Manager, go and figure it out. So what the Resource Manager does is it takes whatever you send and figures out, okay, these two resources don't depend on each other, I'm going to deploy them in parallel. So automatically figures out the best way to deploy your resources so that your deployments don't take a long time and don't go, step by step. All right. So first tool that we're going to talk about is ARM templates. And just in case that wasn't clear enough, the ARM and ARM templates stands for Azure Resource Manager. So these are Azure Resource Manager templates. So these are files that use JSON format with a declarative syntax. What that means, again, is that you just tell the Azure Resource Manager, or you just put in your template what you want to deploy, and you don't have to specify, the steps, and defines the infrastructure and the configuration for your resources. So what does a file look like? This is the basic skeleton of an Azure of an ARM template. So at the top we have the schema. So this is what tells the Azure Resource Manager which version of the API it's going to use. So you can use the latest and greatest, or you can use a specific API. Some features of the Azure products are not available in all the APIs. So that's where the specifying this comes into play. This part back here, it specifies the scope of the deployment. So there's different scopes that you can use for deployment. So this one, for example, is for a resource group. You can deploy at a subscription level. You can deploy at a management group level or at a tenant level, provided that you have access to do all those. The examples that we're going to look at today are just going to go to the resource group, but again, you have the possibility to deploy at any scope that you have access to. The content version, that allows you to keep track of the versions of your files. So this is a value that you can specify, version 1, version 2. That way you can keep, you have some sort of record of which version you are using. API profile, you can specify the API that your resources are going to use. So you have the API up here, but your resources themselves, they have a specific version of the API that they can use. And you can specify at the resource level, or you can just specify it here, and all the resources are going to try to use that same API version. Then you have the parameters, so you can pass parameters to your templates. So again, if you want to deploy to a different resource group, you can just have to change the name of the resource group, and it will deploy to all of those. The variables, so you can have, like in any other programming or any other computer program, you can specify variables. If there's a value that you're going to use in the template multiple times, you can specify it there. You can specify user-defined functions if you need to do some sort of concatenation or calculation inside your templates. And this is the resources. That's where, obviously, everything that you want to deploy, that's the section where you're going to put it. And then finally, The outputs, sometimes you might want to, if you create a website, for example, or an instance of app service, you might want to get the name of that instance to another step in your deployment. So this outputs section of the file allows you to do that. All right, so that's just part of what a file or what a template looks like. So again, at the top, you have the schema, you have the content version. You can add metadata to any part of your template if that's something that you want to do. And then you have the list of parameters. And again, this is only part of the template. So depending on how big your deployments are, they can get, pretty big. All right, so we're gonna do our demo for ARM templates. And like Matt said, we know that the demo goats are fickle. So I have a prayer that hopefully will make all our demos run smoothly. Let this code compile in not an hour, but a little while. Allow this application to run with speed and zest, as this will keep users glued to my test. If my code blows up in my face, do it with style and grace. And last but not least, when all is said and run, let thy requirements have been correctly done. That's the blog where I found this gem, so feel free to use it in your own presentations. All right, so let's go to a demo. This is a live coding demo, so we know how those go, right?
Yes, we do. It says no signal.
Ooh, that's not good.
That might be straight to your HDMI cable. I'm not sure.
Well, I guess the prayer didn't work.
Say it again. You didn't offer a sacrifice.
Oh.
Do you have USB-C?
No. So let me try a different port.
I got a first aid kit if you need it.
There we go.
Hey, okay. I'm gonna leave the box of adapters right here.
All right. So let's go back up here. So as you can see, again, these templates can get pretty big pretty quickly. So even though it's a JSON format, and sometimes you might be able to tell what's going on here, it can very quickly get a little bit out of control. So,
do you mind if we turn off the lights for contrast?
sure.
Thank you.
Right. So, again, we have our parameters. I have some variables here as well, and then I have my resources. So in type of resources, you specify what is it that you're trying to deploy. This is trying to deploy an Azure App Configuration resource, the API version. So again, you can specify at the resource level, or you can specify it here. I'm giving, so the name, I'm passing the value of the config store parameter for that. I'm passing the location, and then the SKU, in this case, I'm using just the standard version or the standard SKU for that. Then I'm adding some values to that configuration, and so on and so forth. Now, there are certain things there are certain tools or tricks out there for you to make this a little easier on yourself. One of them, if you're using Visual Studio Code, there is an extension that allows you to manage these ARM templates. So if you see over here in the lower left-hand corner, I don't know if you can actually see that or not. Let me move this a little bit. So right here, you can navigate to the different parts of the template in a little bit of an easier manner. So you can see the parameters, you can expand that. And if you click on the parameter itself, it'll take you to the section of the file where you have that value. So that's one thing that I would recommend if you're not already doing so. I find it very, very helpful to have this extension here in Visual Studio Code. And the same thing for the parameter resources. outputs. Again, if you expand one, you can navigate to it and you can see what you are doing with it. All right. So let's see if we can deploy something here. So first thing that we're going to look at, it's the what if command. So this is going to help us to see some of the difference between these deployments and Terraform. That what if command that you see here, it's going to check, or it's going to tell you what's going to change before you actually go and deploy it. So if this is something that you are creating for the first time, you can take a look at what's going to change before you possibly blow up your entire environment. So over here, templates up. All right. Try this again. Okay. So here I'm basically telling the Azure Resource Manager that I want to see what will happen if I try to deploy this template into Azure. So it's going to be running in the background. It's going to make the comparison between what I have on my template and what I have in Azure. And so here you can see that anything that has an equal is going to say it's something that is not going to change. Everything that has an asterisk is something that it's going to ignore because it's not in the template. So if you don't specify the template and you're doing an incremental deployment, which is the default, it's going to leave anything that you don't specify untouched. You have the option of, there's a flag that you can specify to basically blow up your environment and just get rid of whatever it is that, that you don't have in your template. But I would be very careful if you want to go with that option. So all these things are staying the same. All these other things are ignored. So 5 are not going to change, and then 5 are going to be ignored. So let's try. So if I were to deploy this, actually, I'll just change this to create. Hopefully, if all goes well, what's going to happen is that, did I not delete that? Or did it run already? I thought it did, but anyway, let me see if that doesn't clash with each other.
It's a race.
That didn't work. Let's try this again. Yes, there you go. All right. I don't know if it ran at the same time. Let's try to create it again. So as you can see, so I'm specifying the resource group, and then I'm telling the Azure Resource Manager the file that I want to use. This time, hopefully, there you go. So I removed that. I ran my template, and like I said, it does an incremental, so it just deploys what is different compared to the what is in Azure already. Now, usually what you want to do is you have the option, obviously, to run this on a PowerShell script or something like that. But what you probably want to do instead, let me delete this again, is have it set up. So you have it set up probably on a release pipeline. So for example, so this is a Azure DevOps. I have a release here. So I have just a simple step of deploying to an Azure resource group. So you specify all the values for your Azure connection, the resource group that you want to use, location, so all those parameters that we have on the template. And then you can also specify a value from a GitHub repo in this example. So you can pass template parameters to this. So if I were to change this, well, actually, I don't have to change anything because I already did. Save it. There we go. So I commit this. And over here, I have a continuous integration trigger. So whenever that it detects that change, we go back, we see that the release is already running. So you can do this in an automated fashion. So again, every time that if you want to set up a demo environment, every time that you are actually going to do a demo, you can just set up your release pipeline to build your infrastructure, deploy your application in there, again, in an automated fashion. So you just have to trigger this, and you will get that deployment over to Azure. So that, yeah.
The form that you were just showing, where there's a lot of edit controls, how does that relate to the JSON file? Is that the same set of values? Is it a form, or is that like, how does that relate?
Are you talking about this, or which one?
The ARM template form, you had it on there a couple of screens ago.
This?
Maybe.
So you're talking about this one, maybe?
Keep one in there, yeah. What is that?
So this is, have you used Azure DevOps before?
No.
Okay, so in Azure DevOps, what do you use for continuous integration or continuous deployment? Do you use anything right now?
Yeah, GitHub Actions.
Okay, so this is similar to that you can set up, in this case, your release pipeline. So this is a task that is available in Azure DevOps that is specific to do an Azure, an ARM template deployment. So if I wanted to add, so for example, if you want to deploy or if you want to build a .NET Core application, those are just tasks that are available in Azure DevOps that you can configure to do your builds or your deployments in this case.
Was any of this sourced from the JSON file, or was this something you set up separately?
No, this is these options are specifically on DevOps, so it's not really. It doesn't really have to do with the templates itself.
Okay.
This is just an example of how you would normally, or how I've seen these deployments being used.
Okay.
Because again, if you do like a GitHub change, or you can run them automatically if you go to Azure DevOps, you don't have to do a PowerShell script, or if you choose to do so. It's just another option to do the deployment. Okay, so that finished. So if I come back over here, that key values should be back there. So again, in an automated fashion, I deployed my resources, or I made change to any existing resources that we have here. Any questions about ARM templates before we move on to the next one?
Do you write them from scratch?
Good question. The question was, do you write those templates from scratch? So there's a couple options that you have for that. So number one, you can go to the Microsoft site, and they have documentation. The only caveat with that is that you can, if you choose, if you look at the templates in the Microsoft documentation, they're going to have every single thing that you could possibly have on those templates. So that is one, one problem if you want to do it that way. The other thing that you can do is, so let me delete this, If you have this extension that I added to Visual Studio Code, you can just type ARM, and then it starts to fill all the things that you have to put in there. So if I went to resources, let's create, I think, app, web. So web app, so that would be a website if you want to deploy that. So it makes it a little easier to build your templates if you have that extension.
What was the name of the extension?
It's just ARM templates extension for Visual Studio. Let me see where's that thing.
I mean, I saw it said ARM template outlined down there, but I didn't catch the name of the actual extension.
Azure Resource Manager Tools.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Now, another trick, so if you want to do that, if you want to use this, another trick that you can do is every time that you create a resource in the Azure portal, you have the option to download a deployment template. I don't know if you, so let's go.
That, I just played with this a little bit, and that was what I did.
Yeah.
Just get what I did through the portal.
Yeah, so that,
download that, and it didn't look like something I would want to write from scratch by hand.
yes, definitely not, because you, even with the with this extension, you still need to know the name of the resource that you're looking for. So there's still some things that you would have to kind of learn or know what to look for this to be a little bit more effective. So, but yeah, the cheat of downloading a template from Azure is something that I've used in the past to get started with these. Any other questions before I continue? Yes.
So what are the other ways you can create that ARM template? Can't you go through the UI and create ARM template?
Through the Azure portal?
Yeah.
No, as far as I know, you can't do that. The only other way, so the other cheat that we were just talking about, so let's see.
I think if you build a resource, you might be able to download it from there, but.
Yeah, you do have that option too. So if you do, I think export template. So that's the other option. The only thing that I don't think it does is I don't think it exports some of the values. But you have here, again, you don't start from scratch if you already have an existing resource. Or again, if you want to create, if you create one from scratch in the portal, you can also download the template. And then here, you click download, you will get the actual JSON file that you can use, save in your machine or upload to a repo and then use it from there. Any other questions before continue? Okay. Okay, so show of hands, who thinks ARM templates look easy to use? All right, that's what I thought. So, and that's also what the conclusion that Microsoft came to. So, they have conversations with the people that were using these ARM templates, probably all said, this is a pain, help us out. So, Microsoft came up with Bicep. So this is a domain-specific language that aims to drastically simplify authoring experience. So, other words, they just want to make it easier for you to do these automated deployments without having to learn all that JSON and all that syntax. And especially if you're a developer, once we look at Bicep files, I think you'll find it a lot more easier to digest and a lot more familiar to what we use. This is a transparent abstraction over ARM templates. So again, this is just like a layer on top of ARM templates. So at the end of the day, your Bicep code is going to be converted into an ARM template, and that's what the Azure Resource Manager is going to use to deploy that. So you can take an ARM template and transform it into a Bicep file if you are already working with ARM templates. So the format for a file, you can tell it, or I hope that it's not just me, but just from a first glance, it looks a lot more familiar. Again, if you're a developer, it looks a little more user-friendly as well. So again, at the top, we can specify the scope, same functions or same concepts as with ARM templates. You can put decorators on top of your parameters. So if you just want the parameters to have certain values, you can put that on top of there. Variables. So if we are using variables in your template, this is how you specify them. And then if you want to create a resource, you can just do resource and then a symbolic name. And then you still have to know and you still have to learn the names that Azure gives to each of the resources. But again, it's a lot simpler than using an ARM template. And then you have the resource properties. So yes, the SKUs or anything that you need to configure for that particular resource. Another great thing that about Bicep is the concept of modules. So you can create you can have all different parts of your deployments in a file. So if you just want to have your website and your database as a module, you can have that in a file and reuse it in different files if your deployments or your applications are a little different. And you can specify parameters for those modules as well. And again, just with ARM templates, you can also specify outputs from your deployments so that you can use those values in other steps of your deployment process. So this is an example of a file, what it looks like. So up here, again, you'll see those decorators. So this template is using a storage prefix and specify that the value for that parameter, minimum 3, maximum 11. You have other parameters here that that have a default value. So the storage SKU and the location have a default value. There's a unique storage name that is created, and here are the resources that you're going to use. So you can see here, STG is a name that is going to have that this resource is going to have in the template. This is the name that you need to know or you need to be familiar with from an Azure perspective to be able to deploy that. The storage name, the locations, all the properties for your resources are going to go in here. And then this is also, this has an example of a module. So there's a web app module that this file is importing. So the name is web deploy, and it has 2 parameters that we are passing here. So again, it allows you to be reusable. You can, so here for the output storage point, it's a type object, and then you can just access this resource and you can access your properties in there. So the concept of modules and Bicep, the other thing that it allows you to do is you can upload your files into a registry, for example. So if you want to share it across your organization, if you have different locations, you can just put them on that registry and reference them in here in the modules. So everyone would have access to your template. So you create your template once, and anyone across your organization can use it if they have access to that registry. Kind of, if you've used Docker containers, kind of the same example where you can use registries for that.
So a question for you, Sam, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So going back to that last slide, the resource STG, Microsoft storage, yada, 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 that's somewhat equivalent to saying like, hey, I want to declare a new variable, the variable's name is STG, and here's what type it is?
Yeah, sort of. So what you're saying is that I want to deploy this resource. It's of type storage account, and I'm using this version of the API. And then these are all the properties that I want this storage resource to have. The name that you're giving it here is just, again, if you want to reuse it at any other part of the template, that's a lot easier than writing something like this or using something like this. So that's why you give it, so that you can use it as a variable, sort of as an object in any other part of the template. So we were talking about modules, so you can reference other Bicep, and you can also reference other ARM templates. So if you're already working with ARM templates and you don't want to migrate all of them, you maybe just want to start using Bicep, try it out before you migrate everything else. You can use your ARM templates as a module. And like I already mentioned, you can import modules from private or public registries. So if anyone has made their Bicep templates available in some public registry, you can just reference those. Or again, if you are going to create one in your company, your organization, anyone that has access to it can use those modules. Now, some of the things that also make it more powerful is that you can have conditionals in your Bicep files. So as with any other if statement in a computer program, it allows you to do conditional deployments. So here is you're saying that if it is on whatever deploy on, then it's going to deploy this. Otherwise, it's not going to do anything with it. So it gives you that flexibility that it would be a lot harder, or actually I don't know if you can do it with an ARM template. I've never tried that.
How complex can the expressions in the parentheses get?
I think I have an example.
Are you just passing a parameter there in that example, but can it be more involved?
You could probably use, so if, for example, let me go back here. You could reference like these properties, for example. So you could use something like that in your if statement if that's something that you want to use. So you can, anything that you use in your ARM and your Bicep file that has any sort of reference like this, you can use in those if statements. So this one is just obviously a simpler example. The other thing that you can do is you can also use loops. So this allows you to do define multiple copies of resources, modules, variables, properties, or outputs. So you have kind of the same thing or the same variances of loops that you would have in any other programming language. So you can loop on an index. You can loop over items in a collection. You can loop over dictionary items. Over integer index and items. So if you want to loop over items and do something with the index to maybe create a single name or a unique name, you can do that. And you can also loop over items and add a condition to it. So if you're looping over some items and you only want to deploy some of them based on a particular condition, you can combine those two.
So does that filter out some of the items, or just say only do the for loop if something is true?
That filters some of the items.
Okay, cool.
So you can specify it will only execute the body of the loop if the condition is met. All right. Before we see the examples, any questions about that? Okay. So again, we're gonna go to Visual Studio Code. Hopefully it doesn't, okay, my signal's still there. Again, just like with ARM templates, there is an extension if you use Visual Studio Code. Going back to the Azure Resource Manager, there's an extension for Visual Studio if you want to use that. I haven't tried it, but just remember that that is the case. So this extension for Visual Studio Code is just called Bicep. So if you search for that extension, you'll be able to see that. One thing to notice though, one of the features that I'm going to show you today is not available or it's not working properly on the latest release of the extension. So just a heads up on that. So let's see, let's look at an example. So remember that other ARM template that I showed you? That's the ARM, the Bicep version of it. So again, a lot simpler, or at least simpler and easier to read, at least I think. So I'm defining my parameters here, config store name. I'm defining some key values, key value names and key value values. And then I'm here specifying that I want to deploy a resource that is of type config store, and I'm naming this just config store, and I'm specifying all the properties for it. And I have here a content type that I am specifying for this key value value. So a lot more user-friendly, a lot easier to read, and especially if you're just getting started with these automated deployments, I think you'll find it a lot easier to get started with this. So let's see. Again, if you're working with Bicep, you also have that what if statement or that what if operation available. So let's see. Don't have that one. What is that?
Can you run like the bicep to JSON and then do like check the changes and stuff? Like, is there a one way or both way interpolation of it?
I think so. I know there is a way to take your Azure, your ARM templates to Bicep. I would assume that there's the other way around.
But you wrote both of those independently.
What's that?
You wrote the bicep version of the JSON ARM template manually, right?
Yeah, yeah. So you can, the other thing that you can do, and that's the other example that I have, is you can do this. So you remember that I said that you can use ARM templates as a module? So here is, I'm defining this config store, and all it takes is that ARM template. So this is going to deploy, or you're going to deploy the exact same thing that we deployed with the ARM template, but this is using Bicep. So like I said, if you're already using ARM templates and you don't want to just move to Bicep completely, you can try this mix and match and see if Bicep, you find Bicep a little bit easier to digest, and you can just reuse your templates.
Quick question.
Yes.
So when you have those bicep conditionals like equals or if something then equals, when does that get evaluated? Is it when you render it to JSON, and does that conditional kind of transform into a JSON representation of that conditional, which is later then evaluated when you actually execute it?
So the question is when are the if evaluated? So that would get evaluated before this gets transformed into JSON. So your JSON file would only end up having whatever resources satisfy that condition. So that's kind of you would only able to deploy those.
So it's at render time then? Not at deploy time?
I think so. Yeah. I'll double check and I'll get back to you on that, but I think so. Okay, so like I said, you can deploy this. So if we do this, let me check if that. What do I have here? It looks empty. Oops. Creation. Let's try that. Oops. Right. bicep.
There's a case in.
Bicep model arm. So bicep. Well, I'll come back to that. One thing that I want to make sure that I show you is there is a trick if you are using bicep. So there is this insert resource. If you take a resource ID, so if let's say I go back to this group and I go to this app configuration resource, and I go to, where's my IDs? Properties, what we got? Properties. Resource ID. If I copy that, go insert resource. So this is the feature that I mentioned that is not available in the latest version of the extension. But as you can see, it takes a resource ID and it's just gonna grab, it's gonna create a bicep template for you automatically. So that's one thing that you can use to kind of get started with it. It doesn't have the key values that you have in there, but again, it's a good way to get started with a bicep file. Let me see if we can deploy any other one of these. Do I have on this one? I might have got rid of one of them. Not sure where it went. It looks like I deleted one. Okay, I have one more thing still to cover, so I don't want to spend too much time in this. But before I move on, any questions about Bicep?
That feature you're talking about, is that coming?
No, this one, no. So you just have to install a previous version of the extension,
Okay.
and then you are able to use that. I'm assuming that eventually they're going to fix the latest version, but you just have to either downgrade or install a specific version for it.
Okay.
This is really cool. This is one of those things I have to kind of like study at length. Are your slides going to be available afterwards?
Yes. Okay. So they will be available in my in GitHub. And again, you can connect through any of the channels, and I'll be happy to answer any other questions you might have after the presentation.
Awesome. Thank you.
I think the error you're getting is you need to go one deeper into the app configuration directory.
You are correct. I forgot that I added that directory. Let's see if that's the case. So use this one. All right, so we'll let it run. And what will happen is, or what should happen, is that I should see now the same app configuration resource created in there. So we'll run. We'll go back to the resource groups in the meantime. Eventually it will be there once it's done. So I'm going to move on so that we can continue and we can finish hopefully in the next 5 minutes. Any other questions before I move on? And I'll come back to that demo. Okay. So the last tool that I want to talk about is Terraform. So it's one of the other very well-known tools that are available to do these kind of things. So this is an open source infrastructure as code tool for provisioning and managing infrastructure. It uses a language called it's a HashiCorp corporation language, I believe that's the name of it. And it can provision resources to multiple cloud providers. Now, I want to make very clear that what that doesn't mean is that you can just take a Terraform template that deploys to Azure and use it on other cloud providers. What it means is that the language itself, as long as you're using the right providers and you're specifying the right values, the same language will allow you to deploy to Azure, Google Cloud, or AWS. So that is the main difference and the main advantage that it has versus ARM templates and Bicep. Because no matter what you do to an ARM template or to a Bicep file, you will never be able to deploy to a Google Cloud or AWS. So that will be one of the things to consider one of the factors to consider when making a decision of which tool to use. So there's two basic elements in the Terraform syntax. One is the arguments. So you specify here kind of you're giving a value to this argument, and the other ones are blocks. So this is how you specify, for example, a resource, an AWS instance. You're giving it a name, and here you're specifying all the properties that you want to deploy for your resources. Another difference between Terraform and these other tools that we saw before is that Terraform stores the state of your infrastructure in a file. So what this allows you to do, or what this is used for, is to determine the differences of the resources that you want to deploy versus what's out there in the real world. So Terraform by default runs the what if command that we saw in the beginning with ARM templates. So by default, whenever you do a Terraform deployment, it will tell you, it will create a plan, and it will tell you this is everything that's going to change in your infrastructure. All right, let's see what that looks like, what those files look like. Let's go back real quick. There you go. So we're going back here. It finished the deployment, and again, this is the file that is using the ARM template as a module. So it deployed the app configuration resource, and it deployed some of the key values that I have on that other template. So Terraform. So this is a very simple example that we're gonna do. First, we're gonna look at the provider. So here, this is how you specify the provider that you're gonna use. So here I am specifying that I'm gonna be deploying Azure resources in this template, and then I'm using this random to create a random name for a resource group. So the name here, this is the name of the resource group, and then here is where I'm actually deploying the resource. I'm giving a location, and then I'm using this random pet resource to give it an ID. I also have an output, so I'm specifying the output for this deployment to be the resource group name. And here are the variables that I am going to use for the deployment. So again, like on the other ones, you can specify different values for these once you make your deployments to make them repeatable. This is the state of this is the state file that I was talking about. So here you can see how it has the information of what I had at that point. I've deleted this resource group since. So, but the last time I did this deployment, there was this resource group that I have out there. So again, this is what's going to be used to compare what you're going to deploy versus what's out there. And that's especially useful if you have a particularly big template. Terraform is automatically going to use this file instead of checking what you have. It's going to use this, what you have on the cloud is going to use this file to do that check. So let's get out of this. Make sure we go to the right. Right directory this time. So I'm gonna make sure that everything is initialized. Okay. And then this is the command that you use to create that plan. So this is going to compare what I have in my templates versus that state file, and it automatically is going to tell me what's going to change between the two. If you remember, for all the other tools, we actually had to explicitly call that what if command before, so that we could get that information. Here, Terraform is going to give you that information right off the bat. So here it says refreshing state, and then here is here's what the output of that is. So it's telling you here explicitly that there were some changes that were made outside of Terraform. So it detected that I've deleted that resource group since the last time that I've deployed, and then it's telling you what it's going to do. So this is what it's going to create, and it gives you a summary of what it's going to do. It's going to add 1, no changes, and nothing to destroy. So then what you want to do, you want to apply that plan. And if I go over here, when that deployment is completed, there will be another resource group created in here. All right, so all that is going. So obviously the question, if you're not using any of these already, which one should I use? And as with a lot of other things in technology, the answer is it depends. It depends of what you want to do. If you have resources across multiple clouds or multiple cloud providers, the answer obviously is going to be you probably want to go with Terraform, because that will give you the flexibility and the ability to deploy to all those resources without having to learn different languages, or having to mix. If you are already if your resources are in the Azure platform, then I would use Bicep unless you're already using ARM templates. But as you saw already, personally, I prefer Bicep. It's a lot cleaner. I think it's a lot easier to understand, and much easier to use as well. And then I would really just go with ARM templates if that's something that you are really familiar with, super comfortable with, and really you have no appetite for trying something different. But if that is not the case, then I would definitely try Bicep if your deployments are in Azure. So let's go back, check. So there's the resource group that I created with my Terraform template, and you're good to go. So that is everything I have today. Any questions overall about any of this? Yeah.
With the what ifs, is there any way to kind of extrapolate potential cost impact to what you're deploying?
The question is if there's any way to use what if to determine potential cost.
Like resource costs?
Not that I know of, but it's a good question actually. I'll look into that. As far as I know, it only tells you what differences or what it's going to change. I don't think it tells you anything related to cost. So those are, this last slide is useful links that you can use to get started. So here is the link to the Azure templates. That's from the Microsoft documentation. They also have some quick start templates. So these are smaller version of the templates that you can use that are not going to have every single thing that you're going to need to deploy. You can go to this GitHub to get also templates from Bicep and get more information about it. And then you can also go to this GitHub to get Terraform templates specifically to Azure. But from there, you can probably navigate to find resources or templates for other cloud providers. And then those are, again, all the how you can get in touch with me if you have any questions about this, or you've seen any of my other presentations. If you have questions about that, I'd be happy to get in touch and answer any questions you might have. That's it for me. Any questions? All right. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What is the actual use case for the repeatable aspect, like being able to deploy the same thing?
I would say the example that I gave with that demo environment. So if you don't want to have a demo environment out there, especially if it's an environment that is going to use a lot of resources and a lot of cost, so you can probably just want to do that from scratch every time that you have a demo, tear it down, delete all those resources when you're done, and then do it. You can do that as many times as you want. So if you're doing demos to your clients or to other teams in your company, especially again, if those resources consume a lot, you don't want to have them running, the entire time. So that would be the most common, or I think the one that I've kind of come across the most, where you want to just do your demo environments to be available to deploy them instantly and do the same thing over and over again. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Anything else before I turn it over to the raffle?
The raffle.
All right.
That was awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I caught the end of that at the code match, and catching it again that was awesome.
How'd you like it?
The quick recovery from the demo gods failing you as well, by the way. All right, raise your hand if you are both eligible and interested in winning a JetBrains license for a year. 1, 2, 3, 4.
What are the eligibility?
If you are not organizing this and you haven't won one in the last year, you're eligible. So if you're not sure if you're eligible, you're probably eligible. So keep your hands up, please. 1, 2, 3, 4. Sam, you in?
I already have one.
All right. Okay.